Hello, I'm Adam Summerville. I am a professor at Cal Poly Pomona, and this is work that I did in conjunction with Ben Samuel at University of New Orleans, who's not here today. Today I'll be presenting on Kismet, which is a sort of small social simulation language that Ben and I have been working on. So to give some background, I come from UC Santa Cruz, Ben comes from UC Santa Cruz, and our lab at UC Santa Cruz has a history of using social simulation as the underpinning for like sort of games and game-like experiences. So there's Prom Week, which was before my time, but Ben worked on it. And then perhaps more relevant to both of us, there is Bad News, which is an experience that Ben, who is the actor on the right over here behind the screen, and myself in the sweater, and James Ryan at the computer worked on, which has sort of a deep social simulation. A small American town is simulated for approaching 200 years. And then players are allowed to sort of go around the town and talk to the people. And so to sort of give you like why Kismet, one of the things that always came up whenever we were showing Bad News somewhere was like, well, that sounds really great. I'd love to run this at home, instead of doing D&D one time, like get my friends together and we can play, do Bad News. And so, something we've always talked about is like, what is Bad News, the home version? Is there a Bad News, the home version? I don't think Bad News itself would translate into a home version, but I think the core idea of Bad News, of having this social simulation that then enables a sort of tabletop role-playing experience, is something that would be compelling and something that would be good. But I think Bad News itself can't make that translation. So the goal is to create something that could have that. And even more so, what's exciting to me is, that these games, Dungeons and Dragons and others, are a fruitful space for, people to jump in and start to develop their own things, right? There's lots of different modules in Dungeons and Dragons. And so, and they might not be done by, say, like a casual creator, but creating a new Dungeons and Dragons module, or creating, running your own campaign is, more casual than, authoring your own game. But even still, right, there's, a lot in the tabletop role-playing, space. There are, like the games that are powered by the apocalypse, and where there's this system that a lot of games have taken and adapted and mutated in a way that enables a wider spreading and creation of games than if you just whole cloth had to make your own game. And so in the spectrum of full professional and casual, somewhere in the middle. And so that's the type of thing that we're hoping for from Kismet. Now, there are other social simulation engines out there, right? There is SIF, or I forget the other name for it, and SIF is now splintered off into like eight different sub things. But so SIF is what powered Prom Week. Here's a bit of an example from the documentation from SIF that this is in fact the entire documentation, so that you can also include the following line is where it yes, ensemble, thank you. I was blanking on it. So it drops off here, and I know this was not meant for external consumption necessarily, but I tried to use SIF and I found it confusing, and they made this wonderful tool, and yet it was harder for me to use than than just like a text editor, because I had to learn this new editor. I had to learn all of its rules and where things go. And so, you know, yeah, sorry, I guess I forgot the next slide. So, and even worse is, you know, what it looks like for Talk of the Town, which is the simulation that underpins Bad News, which is just, you know, a bunch of Python files that probably only James and maybe myself, you know, could understand without, you know, a very long, arduous learning process. You know, so I'm inspired by something, you know, like tracery, where, you know, it exists as a JSON that can then just be, you know, edited in any text editor, or, you know, a text box, and enable things like cheap box done quick, you know, to, you know, for casual creators to sort of quickly get something out there. So, you know, these are some of the things that we're thinking about in the creation of Kismet. So our goal is a relatively simple social simulation framework, that it should be easier to author than other approaches and have a lower barrier to entry, but still powerful enough to create interesting dynamics. But it doesn't need to be, say, at the full level of, say, Talk of the Town, which, you know, has, you know, underpinnings from, you know, social psychology. You know, we don't necessarily care at that level because the end user won't necessarily care at that level, and the sort of quote unquote casual creator would not necessarily want to author at that level. And the dream is that people who are not us will use it to enable new forms of experience, right? Like, so we have our own experiences that we want to enable with it, and that would be like, you know, small dream, but like big dream is other people get this and use it and create things with it. So the rest of the talk is just going to be sort of a deep dive into Kismet, and I might go over time, and I'm sorry about that. You can either, you know, cut me off, Max, or we can just, I'm the last one of the days, I think, so I can just burn some time at the end. Anyway, so in Kismet, there are sort of three first-class objects. There are characters, there are locations, and there are actions. And then there's sort of four sub-objects that then modify the behavior. There are traits and statuses, which characters can have. There are tags, which can be applied to actions. And then finally, there are roles in which characters can enact at locations. And so a character is really just sort of an entity that then has a bunch of, you know, traits, roles, and statuses applied to it. So every character is just sort of unique identifier, and then some mapping of that identifier to the traits, roles, and statuses that are applied to it. Also, if anyone wants to just throw anything into the chat, any questions as we're going, I'm totally fine with that as well. It's how I run my lectures. It's how we can run this. So in the simulation, characters will go to locations. Everything exists every character, when they're doing something, exists in a location. And so when they're at a location, they're enacting a role at that location. You know, so these roles might be, like, if you're at a grocery store, maybe you're going and enacting the customer role, or maybe, you know, that's where you work, and so you're enacting the, you know, bagger role, or the manager role, or the checker role, or the restocker role. You know, or it could just be employee, right? It depends on the level of fidelity that the author cares to author at. And so when they're at these locations and enacting these roles, these enable characters to have new actions that are specific to that role. But they don't necessarily have to use those actions, right? You can go to the supermarket, and if you're enacting the role of the customer, then maybe you have a special action of shop, which wouldn't be available to you if you were at church or the park. But you also might just, you know, chit chat with somebody, which is an action that you might have in any number of places. And And so it is through these actions that characters interact with each other and with the world. So actions can, make changes to other characters, to yourself, to the character who's taking the action, and also to the locations in the world. And so while characters are sort of the stuff, actions are the center, right? It's how, every bit of interesting, things that you would want to look for happen in Kismet. And sort of everything ties back into the actions. So traits and statuses affect the likelihood of a character taking specific actions. They can add and remove statuses of characters and locations. And then they can also be observed by other characters. And here's sort of vaguely extended Bacchus-Nauer form. You can read the paper for more, or I can also give you the extended Bacchus-Nauer form if you really care that much. But you can think about it, an action is sort of a name, and then an argument list of who is, the one taking the action, who is receiving the action, what else is the action about. And then, but actions are constrained by their locations and preconditions. So, where you are, who you're with, other statuses. They produce results. And then again, they're selected based on their tags. And then they also have some notion of the visibility. And so, right, so, me chit-chatting with somebody else would have a low visibility. Me getting into a fist fight with someone else would have, could have high visibility. So here's sort of like, say, like the hello world of Kismet. It's sort of the simplest possible action. And so say we have like chit-chat. And so we have the talker, who is the enactor, which is shown by sort of the greater than, means that that's the person who is the enactor. There's the listener, who is the receiver, which is sort of the less than. And then we have, sort of the text realization of it, which would be, the talker has idle chit chat with listener. And those, if you wanted to get a log at runtime, at simulation time, the talker and listener would be filled in by the names of the people. And then the only sort of precondition is that the talker and the listener must be in the same location, which is denoted by the fact that they are in the same sort of parentheses. And then finally, it has the tag of talk, which we'll get to. Well, how does that tag of talk work? But we can get more complex. So a sort of talk plus plus, advanced talk would be, say, like gossiping about, which still has the talker and the listener, but now it has some gossip, which is some action that has occurred. That's the hot goss, denoted by the star, and then the person who is being gossiped about, and so that's not the person receiving it, but is instead this other person of the gosling, with the caret denoting that they are not the one receiving it per se. And so this would be that the talker is relaying gossip about the gosling to the listener. And so here we still have that the talker and the listener must be in the same location, but say the question mark on the gosling means that person could be anywhere. They could be at the same location, which would be perhaps rude to gossip about someone in the same location as them. I guess gossiping is always rude, but especially rude, maybe a little bit brazen. But they could be somewhere else, right? You could be gossiping about this person sort of behind their back. They might be somewhere else. So it also has the tag of talk, but it is also mean. And then we have some, more preconditions here. So here we have that the talker knows about some bit of hot gossip, the action that occurred. And there's lots of ways in which a character might know something. Both the hot gossip has to be gossip worthy, which means that it would have the tag of gossip worthy. And then finally, that the gosling is the one who did the action, the hot goss. And now, because of the way Kismet works, by default, talker, listener, and gosling must all be different people. And so, the gosling is the one who did the hot goss. So the talker is not going to be relaying that they're the one, like that they did something that's like really rude and gossip worthy. And then finally, we have the results. And so here we might have that, the listener likes the gosling less because they've now heard this bad thing that they did. The listener might trust the talker less because they think that this person is going to maybe gossip about them in the future. They know they're a gossip. The listener now knows the hot gossip, so that they can now be the one, they can now relay it in further chains of gossiping. And then maybe that the talker likes the listener because they got to, they got to spill the juicy gossip. And so they like this person. So characters can know about things. And so there's a number of different ways of representing the relationships between characters and actions. So, a character might have been the one who did the action. A character might know about the action, which means that they either did, received, saw, or heard it. The character could be the one who received the action. The character could have seen the action, which means that they are in the same location and they happen to observe it based on the visibility of the action. And then they could also have heard about the action, which means that they have received knowledge of the action, but did not either see, receive, or do the action. And then as we saw, these can be reasoned about inside of Kismet. So again, while actions are the core of Kismet, so traits are sort of how different personalities are enacted. So by default, every action that a character can take is equally likely. And so without any traits, a person might be just as willing to chit-chat as they would be to, erupt into song and dance or to get into a fist fight. And, as we know, some of these are more likely than not, depending on your personality. And so traits affect the probability that a given action will be taken. Again, vaguely grammar representation of this, just moving on. But so we might have something like, say, the trait extrovert. The slash denotes that it could also be called extroverted, and Kismet will recognize that these two are the same thing, which just sort of enables an author to type slightly more naturalistic. They can, say these things all map to the same concept of extrovert. And then you say you have the valence, so we have plus plus plus, which means that the extrovert is, much more likely to do. And then we have talk, which means any action that would be tagged as talk. So, when it comes time for characters to select their actions, you sort of sum up all of the different tags that actions have and look at all the traits and then sort of get, okay, well, this one is +5, this one's -2, this one's 0, and then turn that into a probability distribution. And, we might have, say, like the introvert, which is, much less likely to talk. But if we had it this way of, that there's the trait introvert and the trait extrovert, someone could be both an introvert and an extrovert, which would mean that it would sort of cancel out and nothing would happen. And that's not really what we want. So you can say that traits oppose each other, in which case a character can only have one of them at a time. And the one in opposition is sort of taken to be the negation of the other one, so, or the inversion of the other one. So, here this is the same as what we previously saw, where the introvert would be like minus 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 to talk. But we can also have traits can also be in relation to other characters. So they can have the argument list. By default, it sort of just assumes there's no specific target. But we might have the trait where someone is, say, vindictive, in which case we care about the relationship to other people. So here, if someone's vindictive, they might be more likely to do mean actions if the target of those actions, denoted by, again, by the less than sign, if the target has previously done an action, the person taking the current action received that action, and that action that occurred was mean. So we can sort of do this binding to figure out, okay, well, maybe you're more likely to take revenge on people who have done mean stuff to you in the past, and now you're going to be mean to them. And so you can have traits that, again, relate to other people. Traits can also affect the likelihood of going to locations. So say you have the drunkard, who is much more likely to go to a bar, and the teetotaler, who is much less likely to go to a bar. So denoting that it's a location is done by the @ signs. So following on from traits, very similar to traits, there are statuses. And effectively, there's no actual difference, except that a trait is applied at the sort of beginning of the simulation. When a character is created, they have traits applied to them. Statuses are, applied in the middle of simulation. And so, you might have someone who is drunk, and then they're more likely to do stupid things and less likely to do smart things. And traits and statuses can also have interplay with each other. So you can have something like, say, the mean drunk, which means that a person would be more likely to do mean things if they are drunk. And so you can look to see if you have the status applied to yourself or even to other people, and then have new sort of traits come into play. I'll sort of skip over this. As I said, when you look first, Kismet looks and finds all possible actions. Some are less likely, some are more likely, and then it's randomly sampled, and one of them is chosen. Now, sort of the last sort of bit are locations and roles. Right, so I said that locations are where characters go to take actions. Locations have a number of roles that then the characters can enact. And then these roles are cast at different points in the simulation. So they can either happen at the start of the simulation, which happens at initialization of a location, or also each turn. And so in each turn, every role that was previously assigned via the each turn is uncast and then recast again. And so, again, sort of skipping over it. So we might have, say, like the location of a bar, which says that it supports the one owner role, 2 to 3 bartenders, and some number of, up to 20 patrons. The name for a location can be set either via explicitly calling a tracery file, or with a sort of tracery, a sort of in-place tracery syntax. 5-minute warning, yes, okay. So again, they have these roles, and then so some of them are cast upon initialization, some are cast each turn. And so roles, again, enable characters to use special actions. So, we might have, say, the bartender who has the special action tend bar. And we know that this is a special action that requires this person to be enacting their role as a bartender due to this, colon bartender. So this syntax says this is when this character is enacting this role. So the tend bar action couldn't be done at the grocery store, even if that person was a bartender, because they're not enacting the role of bartender when they go to the grocery store. And it has to be enacting it at the location where they have been cast in that role. So the bartender can't just go to any random bar and decide to tend to bar there, right? It's only when they're enacting it in the one in which they are cast in that role. We can do things like sort of implicitly define that this location, that the drinker must be at a bar, because the bartender is enacting their role as the bartender, which means they must be at a bar, and the tender and the drinker are in the same location, which then would mean that the drinker must also be at a bar. But we can also just say, okay, well, you can do special things if you have this role. Yeah, okay, sorry. Roles can be extended, things can be extended. Okay, future work. So Kismet is still somewhat a work in progress. So would like to sort of finish it up to allow for sort of arbitrary patterns, also temporal pattern matching to find sequences of events and not just did an event occur. We'd like to finish up the backend simulation and also use Kismet as a front end to Felt and perhaps other social simulations and have a pipeline there. So, okay. Anyway, thank you so much. Sorry for the lateness, and yes, thank you.